Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Project Possible. We got still people joining us, so we'll give a couple of minutes for people to join.
Jitto, we can't see your video, if you can. Yeah, I can see it now.
Thanks, Kushal. So I'm just conscious of time. We'll kickstart the first session of 2022. So welcome to Project Possible. And it's kind of with great pleasure to say that we got our first live event for 2022. So we started off in 2021 with kind of the possibilities of doing impossible. That's how it all started off during the pandemic, where we had lots of challenges. People were facing so many things, and in the midst of that, we wanted to have this one word again repeated in our life, which is possible. And that's where all this Project Possible started off. Now, as we entered into 2022, I know it's already mid-month, but I think we can still say Happy New Year, a happy year for all of you, a prosperous and blessed year for you and your family, that you may continue to have good health, a lot of prosperity in whatever you are doing. So on that note, what I'm going to do is a quick run through of Project Possible. As a core team, we came together and we had one vision in hand, that is to create a community of long-term property developers to solve the housing shortage in the UK and achieve personal financial freedom through passive income. Now, the second part of the mission actually came later. We all passionately came together to resolve the housing issue in this country. Now, if you take England, Wales, Ireland, and Scotland, there are people who are still struggling to have a good accommodation. And we as professionals coming from different backgrounds, we saw that as an opportunity, and we came together and decided to do our bit to this bigger problem, which the government is not able to solve. A lot of people are not. So we thought that a collective approach will help us to take this one step forward. And that's how we all came together. So once again, welcome to the live event, all those people who have just joined. It is a global audience. We got people from Asia, US, Australia, and so many other people who will be watching this. So what we have done is we have created a podcast platform as well. So whatever we are going to do this evening will be also telecast or shared in the form of a podcast going forward. At the same time, we are going live on YouTube. So right now we are live on YouTube, so it will automatically get recorded on YouTube, and later people can access this easily through the YouTube. And then for the first time in 2022, we are also going live on Instagram. So while we talk, I'm going to click the live tab, and that's it. We are live on the in Instagram. So let me just, yeah, checking the connection, and that's happening. Yeah, and podcast I've already mentioned. So the whole idea is to give this entire information freely to our audience, to our participants, to our investors, to our community, so that they can learn and grow and continue to build in this journey. When I started off in property in 2007 or 2008, what I realized is property is restricted to only few people, especially the inner circle people, or people with kind of quite a rich or wealthy people. Then I realized at some point in my career, if I get this freedom, the knowledge or wisdom, understanding about this industry, I will make sure that along with the collective people, we will share this freely as much we can. And this platform is all about that. And there are so many people who have done this journey ahead of us. And one of our experts, today's expert, is also who have done this journey for decades. And he has shown this light, shown this knowledge to thousands of people. And that's the reason we have the expert with us who will be continuing to share his knowledge on this platform this evening. So we truly appreciate your time and contribution and trust on this platform of Project Possible. And thank you for taking all that time and effort to be with us this evening. So some of the housekeeping which we need to share. Please keep the phone silent mode. That is one of the biggest distraction. I know it's a blessing in many ways, but at the same time, it is the biggest distraction. when you are acquiring knowledge, you are taking learning steps towards this property journey, it's very important that you keep all the distractions away. John is with us, who is going to give his valuable time to us. We need to make sure that we make the most out of that. So then keep all the distractions away from you. Keep the mute so then we don't kind of distract any of the attendees as well as the speaker. Switch on your video. I was saying switch off, but please switch on the video wherever it is possible. I will encourage switch on the video. It's a very small connected community. We do this very specially for very connected community. So don't worry, just switch on the video. You don't have to dress up, do your hair, nothing like that. Just be there. Yeah. Make sure you make notes. There will be a lot of valuable content will be shared on this platform in the next 2 hours. So make sure you make as many notes you can. And one more thing which I want to mention, we are going to have a Q&A live session. So you will have an opportunity to ask your questions to our expert, John, on this particular platform around between 8-8:05. So make sure you make notes and keep your questions handy. Depending on the time, we'll try to cover maximum questions we can. In the chat box, if you have any questions, anything, please put it in the chat box, because during the presentation, we don't want any disturbance or interruption. By any reason, if this call drops, you have to rejoin using the same link. Yeah. So because of technology, we know it's great, but at sometimes things go wrong. If that's the happens, please make sure that you click on the same link and rejoin. Yeah. It has never happened with any of our events, but still as a caution, based on experience, I'm telling you. You will get all the recording of today's live event. As I mentioned, it's on different multiple platforms. And also, we will invite you to share your feedback of today's event on Trustpilot. At some stage, we will share the link for that. So what's the agenda for today? What is there for you for this evening? So we got the topic which we are going to cover this evening by our expert is how data and insight can help your property business achieve more. Now, when I started off in property, before UK, I started investing property in India. And what I realized is property is something which you really drive out of emotion. You want to you want to build a house and gift it to your parents, and you want it near the beach, or you have so many crazy ideas when you think of having a property. Yeah? But investing into property is a complete different ball game. You have to keep your emotions away. Gut feeling is something else, but emotions away. And I think number is something which you can rely on. Numbers never tell lie. That's a very famous old quote. So we have John, who's our expert. He's going to take us this journey into data and insight and how this can help. And he has helped thousands of people in his career. Then we have a Q&A session, which I already mentioned. We have an opportunity to give you feedback. And then we move into the next month's expert. So we will announce who is going to the next month's expert. We will announce the dates and things like that. We'll share the platforms where you can connect with Project Possible on a day-to-day basis. And we will conclude with a vote of thanks. So who is our expert today? We got John 𝐏𝐞𝐧 with us. Yeah. Now, more and more I was reading about John, I became more curious, and I was just seeing that how well we connect. Let it be John's journey, our personal journey, and our property journey, how well it connects. And that's how when you say something out to the universe, it all comes together, it all gets connected. And that's precisely this is happening in 2022, the first month of the year, and we have John 𝐼𝐾𝐧. So to share a little bit about John, he is born and brought up in Liverpool, but now he's settled in Wales. But he has traveled across the globe. Previously, he was working for retail industry, and he has traveled as a consultant and doing plenty of work. But at the same time, what he was doing specialized was designing, like he was working through product team, and then he understood the power of data. So decades back, he already discovered the power of data, and that's where he left his corporate career and he moved into property. But what he did is the skill, what he has used to make other companies successful, he brought that skill into his own business, property business. And very quickly, he realized that he's able to make a real difference in this industry. And then he started Ultimate Landlord Research, a company he pioneers, he founded. And through that company, he has helped thousands of people to find properties with the help of data and insight research, rather than just guessing, rather having gut feelings, and rather keeping away the emotions. So he is a man who's going to help us understand numbers in a most layman language. I have seen few of his recordings, few of his materials, and the book. He has wrote a book which I will highly recommend. I will leave all that for John to share, because if I keep going on, that's not the purpose of this evening. So on that note, I will introduce John to the virtual platform of Project Possible. Over to you, John.
Gita, what an introduction. I don't know how to follow that, really. Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody this evening for coming along to listen to me talk this evening. For me, it's just such a privilege, an honor, and a pleasure to be able to talk to you about the work that I've done and the successes and the failures that I've had over the years investing in property. As Gito has mentioned, my business is Ultimate Landlord Research, and we really focus on property investing, which is why we're here tonight. We focus on property investing with data and with insight. And I think that's probably more important now than at any point in my property career. So I had a corporate career and I also have a property career. And I've never seen a time where there is so much risk and so much opportunity at the same time. So my talk this evening is going to focus a little bit on that. And we're going to really challenge our understanding of property in the UK, and also how we behave and how we work with property in the UK as well. So, I mean, I see, and for those of you that have seen Trotter's Independent Traders, Rodney and Del Boy, that's really how our industry behaves. It's very much focused on making money, wheeler dealer, try and find an opportunity. Those sorts of things are really prevalent in the industry, and I find that quite unusual. And the reason I find that unusual is because I would expect that of a market trader or a small business or a startup, but I don't expect that of professionals like ourselves, who are spending hundreds of thousands and often millions of pounds on investments without any real knowledge or insight. I'm used to an environment like the one in this picture, one that's packed full of people who are analyzing and are understanding and trying to see the influences in a market to make good and strong and well-informed decisions. Now, that to me is the norm. And I expect my businesses and the businesses of those people that I work with to behave in a similar way. I think most of us have had an experience of working in a corporate or a structured business environment. And I would ask us to first of all question, do we behave like that when it comes to property investing? Because my view is, as an industry, we don't. And I seek to change that. But obviously with myself, I have been a property investor for a couple of decades now, on and off. I really took it seriously around about 7 or 8 years ago, and I really got into it in terms of building a portfolio for myself to support myself, my family, and latterly other people around me as well. And that's something that I'm very passionate about. And it's such a pleasure to hear Gito talk about helping to solve homelessness, because quite often as property investors we get a bit of a bad reputation, particularly in the UK, perhaps less so elsewhere in the world, but certainly in the UK we get a bit of a reputation for not necessarily caring about tenants. And in my world, and in the world of many people that I work with, nothing could be further from the truth. We actually really care, and we are part of the solution in the UK, not part of the problem. And so that's something that I'm on a bit of a mission. I have been on a bit of a mission for getting on for 8 years now to try and address. It was also mentioned that I worked in retail. I worked in retail for a couple of decades. I left university and I worked at Lidl, which is a discount retail operation. There I learned how to be productive, to have productive ways of working. I then went to work for a company called Summerfield, where I learned an awful lot about process and an awful lot about marketing and presentation. I then went to work for Spar. I was kind of headhunted by Spar, actually, and I was brought in to re-engineer some of the things that they were doing in their business. And that basically led to me becoming part of the procurement team. And in the procurement team in SPAR, I was trained to negotiate. And one of the things that I quickly learned in SPAR is that I could negotiate by banging the desk and by being assertive, which would sometimes get results, or I could negotiate with data and with insights. And I found that always got results. So I became quite well known for being the guy that negotiated with spreadsheets and with data, as opposed to shouting at the person on the opposite side of the desk in a negotiation. So I built a bit of a reputation there, and I worked across the whole of the UK, procuring goods and setting up contracts for that business. And then I did a little bit in Europe as well. And then I moved on to Sales Out, where I was again asked to come across and help Sales Out to help suppliers to negotiate. And that's again something that worked quite well. I grew that business quite significantly in conjunction with a leadership team to a point where it got bought out by IRI. And in IRI, I was responsible for data and insights for the whole of the wholesale part of the business. So that would be warehouse and what we would know as restaurants and on-trade establishments. So my job was to provide, and my team's job was to provide data, but not just data, actually the insights, and we'll come on to that in a moment, the insights in relation to what's happening in the markets where these brand owners and these manufacturers were trading, and also what's likely to happen in the future. So, I had many clients, but some of the ones that we'll probably be familiar with will be Coca-Cola, GlaxoSmithKline, Heineken, and many others. So quite a broad range of quite well-known sort of more blue chip type companies. But even there, and I was very happy in my job. I was pretty certain that there was something more that I was meant to do, and I took a decision to really ramp up my property investing, and I left IRI in 2015. So we're talking about 7 years ago now. And what I started then doing is building my own property portfolio. And part of that process was, as Gita mentioned, insight. So insight and data, in my mind, should always lead strategy. We should never take any action if we don't have the information to hand and the data to hand to justify that action. And I'm very passionate about insight and data leading strategy in our industry, because frankly, there are so few people that do it. Now, as we all know, quite often we can be seen as rather unscrupulous and negative and unpleasant, particularly when it comes to the political landscape. So we've had quite a bit of a challenge over the last few years as property investors, but nevertheless, money has been made. People have been provided with great accommodation, and it's been a positive experience for a significant number of people in the UK. But it's not always perfect, and it's not always the way it should be. So this is the reason why I wrote my book, Property Truth or Dare. The reason for that was because I observed a lot of people taking risks because they felt they had to take action. And you hear that a lot, take action now, don't hold back, do it. And that's not the way we should behave as business professionals. We should analyze where the opportunity lies for us based upon our business plan and then act accordingly. So I wrote a book about that and about the truth really about investing in property from my perspective, and also the risks and the dares that we're encouraged to take, and try and take away the unknown element and focus on the some more factual and truthful element of the industry. My businesses today, obviously as already mentioned, I run Ultimate Landlord, and Ultimate Landlord provides research to the market. I produce market reads, so I provide forecasts for the UK market, and certainly over the last 2 years, we have forecast the market pretty accurately at a time when most other small, medium, and large entities struggled to forecast the market correctly. And we'll come on to that in a moment. I've mentioned a book, and I obviously am also an active property investor. So even today, right now, I am still active. I am developing properties. I am acquiring properties. and I'm looking after properties at arm's length, admittedly, but I run my portfolio quite close. So I'm very close to what's happening in my portfolio. And that portfolio is diverse, and it's based in numerous locations across the UK. I'm often asked what I buy and what I focus on, and what my strategy is. My strategy is to buy properties that will appreciate in value faster than other properties in a given area, and to generate the maximum possible cash flow I can from them. So I buy all sorts of properties to meet that strategy, anything from small flats to house shares, so HMOs, for those who are familiar with that term, house shares, houses of multiple occupation. I also buy commercial premises as well. And latterly, I've also focused on land, and I'm just about to start a barn conversion as well. So I got a reasonably broad knowledge of most, as we would call it, strategies in property. But I don't want to talk about me for the rest of the night. I really want to talk about insight. Insight, as in terms of its definition, is the capacity to gain a deep and accurate understanding of someone or something. And the something that we want to understand is where the property market is, where we invest, and where it's likely to go. Now, in my experience, that tends to follow this trend. We have one side, which is opinions and experience, and believe me, there's plenty of that in our industry. And we also have evidence and data. Now, there's not a lot of that. Well, I say there's not a lot of that. There's actually is quite a lot of data, but it's not very easy to access and interpret. So the evidence side of data or insight is difficult to access. So most people spend their lives focused on qualitative data, what people did last year, people who made money, people who were successful, people who've decorated a house a particular way or developed the house a particular way. Whereas I spend most of my time, unusually, in the quantitative side. I look at what's happening in a city, what is most likely to work in a city, which areas of the city are likely to see a boom, and which areas of the city are likely to be really sort of middle of the road or not perform massively well, and which areas of the city are going to bust. They're not going to grow. And believe me, in the city or a county or an area, there will be winners and losers all of the time. And now the art for me is to find those areas where it's worth investing right now, and that constantly changes. So I live my life on the evidence and data side of the business, of the property business or the property industry. And I ask everybody that I speak to, are you mad? Think about what you're doing if you haven't got a data plan. Because in essence, what you're doing is you're playing a game of chance. Would you really think about going and spending 100 or 200,000 pounds of yours or somebody else's money on something that you don't have an understanding of and you don't have any information about? If I said to you, go and spend some money in the stock market, you pretty much want to have some reports and some data to understand what you're investing in, which stock you should be investing in. What you certainly wouldn't do is drive to the factory or to the business and do a little walk around their office or their warehouse to try and work out if they're going to succeed or not. That's just not the way we should behave. That's something that I want us to try and understand and seek to develop within our businesses too. A bit of background about me. As mentioned, I grew up in Liverpool, and I always tell this story because it's kind of important. Purpose was to sort of bring us up in a nice part of town, in a nice area. My mum and my father separated when we were quite young. My mum wanted us to live in a really nice part of town, and that was admirable, and that was her purpose. That's what she wanted us to do. The outcome there was slightly different because we were quite poor when I was younger. We moved into the top floor of this property, and it wasn't the most how can I put it? I mean, it was okay, but it was kind of like the worst property in the best area, and that created challenges and frustrations, and the outcome for us wasn't necessarily as positive as we would have liked, and my mum would have liked. And later on, we moved to a different area where that wasn't the case. So we had it was the worst house in the best area, and that for me was something that sort of gave me a steer as to what I wanted to do with my life and how I would like to behave. And I tell that story about what my family and my mum did because my mum really she wanted the best for her children. Everybody does, but she was only she was a child herself, in essence. She was in her early 20s. She was dependent on everybody else's advice. She moved us, and it wasn't necessarily the right move for us. So, she followed the experts, and the experts gave her advice, and that advice led to somewhere that we didn't want to live. And that's something that really resonates even today, 40 odd years later. If she'd have had the insight and the data, she would have had a more effective strategy, I believe. And rather than depending on the people around her to give her advice, if she'd have done her own homework and looked for insights into the area and what was happening, she probably would have made some slightly different decisions. And we're all guilty of that. But I use that example. I apply that to what we're doing right now. So I want to talk today about sort of 5 key areas. I want to talk about what happened in 2020, how we understand change, misleading data, what the rest of 2021, what happened in the rest of 2021, and what's going to happen this year and beyond for us, and how we can play in that space. So the first thing I want to talk about is sentiment in the media. Okay, the sentiment in the media are dangerous things because they often take things out of context or don't understand themselves. So I always beware of opinions, and I'm very, very cautious when it comes to Bank of England advice and comment. Now, you'll see a lot of that over the coming months because there is some volatility in the market. Bank of England guidance and comment is often taken out of context and quoted out of context by the media. So you've got to look behind the headlines and you've got to check the working out, because we cannot confuse scale and celebrity with accuracy. And I'll give you a few examples of why. So here's a website. They published some information last year about two major entities, the Bank of England and an estate agency, the largest one, Knight Frank. And you can see in 12th of May 2020, they published they forecast the house prices would fall by 7%, and the Bank of England predicts a 16% decline. And that wasn't essentially the case. That was a part of a scale of possibilities. But the agent certainly thought, they were the experts, they thought the market would fall 7%. And then just 2 months later, we have reports saying that UK house prices surged to an all-time high in August. So in the space of 2.5, 3 months, we go from disaster to, oh, hang on a second, the property market's performed really well. Not just one publication, there were several others. 7th of May, forecasting that it's going to decline, and then the Bank of England coming out a couple of months later saying the housing market is going to grow and is going to return to normal levels. And even that wasn't necessarily correct, but it was certainly more accurate than the doom and gloom that was being published at the time. And the critical thing here is none of this is insight. We all get clickbait. We all get headlines that will encourage us to read, and that's great. But none of it is actually based in relevant evidence. There wasn't a graph or a chart or a model anywhere in any of the stuff that was being put out in 2020. No quantitative data. Now, what we did, and we did a significant amount of research at the time when we were in our infancy in terms of starting up this research company, and we could see the orange side of which everyone else was seeing, which all of a sudden we were all locked down. The orange bars on this chart showing that house price growth was tipping negative everywhere, and we would expect that. Nobody foresaw COVID coming. But then if we fast forward to later on in the year, when we get to Q3 and Q4 of 2020, we saw a rebound, we saw growth. So, we had significant, 7.5% growth in some regions, and almost every region by Q4 of 2020 tipped over into really positive growth, more than we'd seen in the 5 years prior to this. So we went from disaster, doom, gloom, don't do anything, sell your houses, don't invest, it's all going to collapse, bubble, all of the noise that you hear, to a situation where, for those of us that held property through that 2020 period, most of us made around about 4.5%, 5% on the assets that we held. So in a disaster that like nothing we've ever seen before, certainly in my lifetime, the market performed exceptionally well, and people were confused and thinking, well, why on earth is this happening? Because surely with a seismic effect like that, the property market will collapse and all of the noise that goes with it. But actually what happened was we started to see an increase in the turnover of stock as we emerged from COVID. So normally most estate agents in data, we tend to find that they'll turn over about 10% of their stock every month. So of all the listings they've got, about a 10% amount of stock gets sold, and then that then gets replaced the following month by more stock. And what we were observing is that agent stock turnover was increasing with every passing quarter, and that for me demonstrated there was stability in the market. Certainly, we were getting close to normal levels even during some sort of shock and some issues within the system in terms of people not being able to move around or go into shops and things. We also saw and observed that actually throughout the pandemic, household income held up. Furlough had a huge part to play in that. People's incomes did not decrease dramatically, and most of us were able to sustain household income and sustain making payments. So there was no major shock or major credit problems in the system either. And because of that, and because of that information, we were able to see and continue to do our affordability checks. And we found that affordability was not falling off a cliff either. We still had, in the case of rent, most regions of the UK remained affordable based upon the affordability criteria for renting a property. Most areas, London's an exception, admittedly, but most areas you could afford to rent, and there was actually headroom for rents to grow. Now, property price is slightly different, but even so, there was still, most people on an average income could go out and start in the property market in most regions and buy a 1 or a 2 bedroom property. Of course, we've got the Southwest and Greater London where there's the exception to the rule, but there's many. I could talk to you all night about that. But generally across the UK, properties remained affordable, although the media doesn't like to publish that. And because of all of this and a lot of other data that we did, we were able to publish a forecast in November 2020 to say, at the time when everyone else was saying the property market's going to crash, and all the experts were saying furlough will end and it'll crash, the stamp duty holiday ends and it'll crash, and all of that noise. And we just went, no, that's not going to happen. In 2021, we're going to see consistent growth each quarter. So that was the forecast that my business did in November 2020. So just coming up to 13 months ago. And I think we can all agree, if we take the blue line, that is house price change. And if we take the orange line, and that is rental value change, I think we can all agree that we were reasonably accurate. So we forecast 6.5% house price growth in Q1, 8.2% house price growth in Q2. I think it was about 4.3 for Q3, and then about 6.1 in Q4. Now, we haven't got Q4's data back yet for 2021, but the other 3 quarters, we were pretty much bang on in terms of house price growth. Now, the reason I did that is not because I'm an expert and I've been buying properties for 50 years, because I haven't. It's not because I've got the biggest property portfolio, because I haven't. It's not because I ran an estate agency and I knew everybody in the whole of the UK. I had a small estate agency. It's because I used data and the models that I've learned and I've taught myself and others. I was able to do that nationally and arrive at an accurate forecast as to what is likely to happen in the coming months. So that was quite interesting for me, because that demonstrated that not just on a local level where I invest, but on a national level, what we do is accurate. And I'll just draw your attention to this. It's something that I struggle to put into words, so I try and do it visually, but I appreciate this isn't so great either, but let me talk you through this. So on the one hand, we've got demand, and this is demand supply. This is basics in terms of economics. The demand key measures, which we measure in data, is in the green, and then the demand, and then the supply, which sort of calms the market and will reduce potentially any house price growth or inflation, is on the right. And you'll see, and I just wanted to think about what's happened. So what are the employment situation like? The employment really held up. And in fact, we've got an employment shortage in the UK. The attention the market was getting and continues to get was very much there. People's lifestyles were changing. Where people live and what they do was in flux. It was changing. Local demand was being reported and seen in data as well. Talked about turnover. The sentiment started to shift. So, if we look at what was happening on social media and the measures we can get out of that, people's attitude was radically and quickly shifting towards, oh gosh, we've made a mistake, we need to buy some property. Affordability, even as I've just shown in the graphs, affordability is not an issue in many parts of the UK. Well, I know we tend to focus on London and the southeast, but in most parts of the UK, actually property is very affordable and very much more affordable than perhaps we believe. There was a much better return on investment in the property market versus some other investment markets as well. And then the critical one in terms of demand is credit availability. Not only did it hold up, but it's actually become easier and more accessible for a lot of people, which is unusual because since the 2008 financial crisis, the credit market's been very tight and very difficult. So for the first time in a long time, we started to see a real relaxation in credit, and that continues even to this day. So we've already got the Bank of England looking at changing the affordability measures for mortgage lending in the UK, which will drive demand. And then I look at the supply. Are we building more stock? Absolutely not. Nowhere near keeping up with demand. The speed of sales began to slow, so it was taking longer because of all of the difficulties with COVID for transactions to go from offer to completion. So that further puts pressure on supply because it's taking longer to convert stuff. Number of listings continues almost every single month, with the exception of August last year. We saw listings per agent drop. So there are fewer properties that are coming to the market than are selling, which is a real nasty and dangerous position to be in when it comes to overall demand and pressures on prices. Well, say nasty and worrying. If you're investing, perhaps not so much. And then macro employment. So the employment situation, people are moving and they need homes, and there are businesses that are setting up in different locations, and offices are changing. That all puts pressure on supply at many different levels, particularly at a local level. And the population isn't changing, so it isn't going down; it's going up. So there's still more demand, still more pressure on supply. All that means for me, in most simple terms, is that I can't see at this moment in time an end to the pressure on house prices and property values in the UK. And I know I'll get criticised, and I know people will have different opinions, and I respect them. All I do is I report the data. I just look at all of these key measures, and I look at the trend, and I look at the historical trend, and I just report it. So what I believe is irrelevant. It's what I see in the data, and I report to you and to others that is relevant. And everything that I see in the data at the moment suggests and reports that there will be continued significant pressures upwards on property values. Now, as a property investor, that's a key part of what we do, isn't it? Because we're interested in house prices going up because we want our assets to appreciate in value. Particularly at the moment with inflation running at 6%, we certainly want to be making at least 6% on our properties. Now, I know that there's a lot of talk about, well, properties are a bit too expensive, and I want to just try and debunk that a little bit. So this is, what we all know, house prices go up. Yeah, it's pretty obvious, and we can see the spikes there in the data as well, where we've had some problems in the past. But property prices continue to rise, and that's because simple just sort of, growth and living in a type of economy that we have, which is based upon annual growth. And everybody gets very worried about house price change, and it's true, it has been quite spiky and volatile in the past. Certainly it would appear to follow some sort of a cycle, and people get very animated and excited about that and about how it changes. But at the same time as all this is happening, we also have wage inflation. People's annual salaries continue to increase in value or increase in amount. So yes, house prices have gone up, but so have salaries. Now the question often that's put to us all is, well, hang on a second, salaries aren't keeping a pace of house prices, and that's true. Now, I know a lot of people think that houses used to be about 3 times an average salary. That's not the case. As a multiple of household income, historically, we've tended to be around 5.5 times the average household income. But certainly since the mid-2000s, that trend changed, and we went into a much higher multiple of income. It's actually somewhere around 7.5 to 8.5 times the average household income, which animates everybody because we say they're not affordable. But yeah, for me, I wonder, is that really true? We've been told what to think. Are we using the correct data? Is this just someone's opinion? I am more interested in how much people pay to service the debt. pay to service the mortgage that they have on a property. Because from a data perspective, that really matters. That really means how much money have people got left over after they've paid to own a property. So we can see house prices going, we can see wages going up there, and then we can also see what people were actually paying in interest on their mortgages. You can see there's quite a big gap there between what we were paying in interest to service debt and our incomes, or the average household income. And if we put that in percentage terms, you'll see that actually since around about 2008, we massively slashed the cost of servicing debt against the property. So what does that mean for us? That means that actually the truth is that the property market has been extremely cheap. It's been extremely cheap to own property in the UK for many years. The difficulty has been the barriers of access. You've not been able to access the credit to enable you to own your property. So that's made it harder for a lot of different sectors of society, particularly younger generation and first-time buyers. So is it about to crash? That's what's often asked. And, again, we've got the spiky chart that scares everybody. And then everybody gets very animated over inflation. And there is a correlation, albeit it doesn't necessarily follow true that they're perfectly aligned in terms of timing. But when there's inflation in the market, house price inflation will kind of either happen before or after, not necessarily at the same time, but it generally will follow a bit of a trend following one another. And the other thing that's often mentioned is interest rates. Interest rate increases affect house prices. Now, I'm looking at this graph and I've looked at it for years. I can't see a correlation between interest rate change and house price change. Certainly not when you put interest rates up, that house prices fall. Maybe there's a little bit of it. Certainly we had a bit of an issue in the late 1980s with a big spike in interest rates, but generally there's not really a correlation. The most important chart that I show people is the household debt to GDP ratio against house price change. So in sort of more simple terms, because it's just really complicated to go right away through that. In essence, if we take on more debt as individuals, as households, property values go up. Now, I know that sounds strange, but it's just, look at those charts. They're two different sets of data. Look at the trend. They are matching up one another almost step by step, year by year. The trend is there. You can see it quite clearly. When we take on more debt, our property values go up. Now, I don't need to remind you that over the last 2 years, we've been in COVID, and people have not been saving more. They've been taking on more debt, either to keep going, or because they just want to sort of enrich their lives, or there's changes in their lives. Debt's been part of it. And also nationally, as a nation, we've become more indebted too. And GDP, it's kind of static. So it means that we are seeing an increase well over 100% in terms of index. We're getting up to sort of 110, 115 on debt, and house prices are naturally following that, which is what they have done since 1979. And at the moment we start paying debt down, that's the point at which we'll possibly start to see a reversal in the demand for property in the UK. So it's not like 2008. It isn't the case that recessions drive a decline in assets. It isn't the case that interest rates will make changes will make houses more unaffordable. It isn't the case that stamp duty was driving demand, and it isn't the case that furlough would cause a house price drop. It was all nonsense. Okay, what we're actually seeing is this: we're actually seeing a rebalancing of growth by region. So historically, we've had Southeast and London. Now we're starting to see the other areas of the UK start to catch up, and that's perfectly demonstrated here. In a market that was growing at 6% or 6.5%, we're seeing some areas growing at 12%. Okay, so that was what happened in 2021, or what was happening in 2021. And also we're seeing a rebalancing of growth by region. So we have, in 1997, not a huge difference between the most expensive areas of the UK and the least expensive areas of the UK. And by 2019, pre-COVID, we'd absolutely maxed out. There was a huge gap between those areas that are traditionally, or those areas that are cheaper, and those areas that are more affluent and more expensive. And that is starting to reverse immediately. So influences, so long-term cost of borrowing, that has a big impact. Increase in debt, that has a positive impact on property values, which sounds wrong, but I can't argue with the data. It's the fact. It's a fact. Job creation and transformation. So people are moving to different areas and changing their lifestyles at a rate which we've never ever seen. The fact we're here today on Zoom, this was unusual just 3 years ago. This is the norm now. The GDP recovery and what happens with that is also something that we need to monitor. You've got to understand that this is the new normal. It's not going to revert back to the way it was in 2019 or 2018. This is the way the market is now, and we have to play in that market. And we've got to get past the fixation with this year versus last year. So we're going to see some really big growth over the next reported growth over the next 3 months. And that's because this time last year, we were all locked down again. We were all getting locked down again. So the annualization of that data skews the reporting. So we'll see house prices are out of control and all of that sort of stuff will be published again, but it's not the case. Okay. So just be aware of these influences. All right. I want to talk about inflation. This is important because inflation is something that is going to impact the property market. Now, this will be difficult for you to see, but we've got the consumer price index for homeowners, the consumer price index, and the out-of-home index in terms of inflation. And this was to May last year, so it's a little bit older than I would like, but yeah, we'll have some more data very soon. And what we've started to observe quite early on is that that it's actually it's not affecting owner occupiers, so people who own properties, the inflation as much as everybody else. So owner occupier housing costs have not gone up. So it's not more expensive to own property, but everything else is getting more expensive. And we're getting all of this all these media publications, inflation rates, scary stuff, Brexit, it's different today from the 1970s. All this sort of stuff is just being put out there, and it's just noise. What really matters is what the ONS and the government are putting out. We definitely have an issue with costs. So if you look at producer, so this is things that are made, price inflation, it's through the roof. It hasn't been so high for over 10 years. It's really, really ramped up. So it's got much, much more expensive very, very quickly to produce. And at the time when I gathered this data in July, you could see we didn't have, most areas of manufactured products were in significant inflation, with the exception of petrol and food and a little bit of tobacco. So petrol, I'm sure we can all remember in the UK what happened in September. We had a petrol crisis, and petrol's got much, much more expensive very quickly. And also food is getting far more expensive as well, because we're ending contracts, excuse me, and the cost of producing and the logistics of making these food products available to us is becoming more difficult as well. And that really means we've got some questions to answer. Should we buy? Should we sell? Should we get rid of some stuff, or should we change our strategies? And these are all questions that we need to be able to answer. Wage inflation has grown significantly, although actual more broad inflation is catching that up. But basically, people have got more money in their pocket, and we know that housing costs, so owner occupier costs, are not rising at this moment in time. So those people that own properties or can own properties are not really being hit in the pocket as much as those that can't. So there is the capacity for them to continue to buy in the property market. And I put this graph in because it's quite important. This demand is just growing and growing and growing in many areas. I picked a random postcode area here. What you'll see actually is that demand is really high in some postcodes. So that's the dark green bar. But actual price change hasn't reflected in some areas price change, and that's because there's always a delay. So as demand increases in an area, the market takes a while to sort of respond to that, i.e. prices go up. So if I was investing in this area, excuse me, if I just looked at sold prices, price change of sold prices, I would be looking at the area at the far right hand side, NN1. Because that's had one of the highest price changes in the last 12 months. But that's not relevant to us. What's relevant to us is demand, because frankly, I would be investing in NN2, which hasn't seen such a spike in house prices yet, but it has the highest demand. So we've got to be aware of that as part of our analysis and working with data as well. And for the reasons that I've said, so you can try and work all these out manually, yeah, if you really want to. But ultimately, it's the demand. If you can measure demand in what you do and how you invest in properties. If you've got a good measure for demand and you've got a good measure for supply, you can actually try and forecast on a local level which areas are going to perform best, because they're all, as we saw in the previous slide, which I'll just go back to, they are all performing differently. So that is the, I think it's Northampton area. There are some areas of Northampton that have grown at 14%, and there are some areas of Northampton that are actually falling in value, or were falling in value when I took this data. So I would much rather base my investments on the demand as opposed to what's happened to house prices. And that's a common mistake I see investors make. They don't consider the fact that price change is quite old and quite outdated. It's demand that matters. That's how we understand what's happening. I've already talked about the things that are going to be happening in the market over the course of this year. I'm not going to labor it. It's just, it's pretty obvious. I think I've covered it, but these are all things that are going to matter, not just in 2021, but they're mattering this year and beyond. These are big issues for us. Okay. Now, I now bring us back. That's sort of the national view, or the sort of the outlook of what's happening. But for me, what matters is what we do locally. Now, examples of typical investor plans that I see is we try and buy below market value. That is very difficult at the moment. Right, or below the advertised price. That's harder and harder and harder to achieve. We want to buy in high rent demand areas, because a lot of us want to rent properties out. We want to, if we're using finance, we want to recycle deposits, and we want to get decent yields and returns on investments. And these plans typically are fed information by the things in dark blue. So you want to go below market value, you go direct to an owner of a property, you go to auctions, you try and ask estate agents to help you out on your journey. Good luck with that. We also try and buy in high demand areas. So we look at word of mouth, we look at city stats, we look at something happening, we ask what the agents think. If we want to recycle our deposits, we think we've got to renovate to add value all the time. We've got to just keep adding value through really hard work. That is not the case. You can actually, and we don't always need to drive a hard bargain. And also, we look at doing interesting strategies, HMOs, serviced accommodation, adding rooms to properties, but more often than not, it's not fact or evidence based. Because it's not fact or evidence based, I just ignore it. It's just not relevant to me, because again, we're just playing this game of gambling. What matters to me is where and what I should buy. Right? I want to make sure that I am buying in the exact location, not Manchester or Liverpool or Swindon, but the exact postcode that performs best. Liverpool 19. Manchester M6, let's say. These are the things that I want to know. I also want to know what property type works best in this, because it's not always the same. Should I be buying apartments in that area that I've identified? Should I be buying 3-bedroom family homes in that area? What works best? What strategy works best? Also, how much rent it'll generate and how that rental market is performing. Even if I don't plan to rent it, it's still important for reasons I'll come on to in a moment. I quite like to recycle my deposits and my cash as well. And I want to know whether or not the market is going to go up or down, not on a national level, not on a regional level, but at a micro level, at the postcode and the property type in the exact location. Is that market in demand or not? And typically we get data like this. This is an example of a comparables report that I've pulled and I've got from an estate agent. But it's not really that relevant. None of that data tells me anything. And most of us want to do all of these things when it comes to finding a deal. We want to find portfolio landlords or reluctant landlords. People want to monetize property. We go for word of mouth. We try and link up with salespeople. We try and buy properties off dead people, which is always a challenge. And we just want to try and find people who will sell up for a price. But for me, what a good deal looks like is it's below market, and nowadays below where the market is going. All right. So you don't always have to get money off. I just want to make sure it's below where the market is going. So if I can buy in an area where there's high growth, then I'll probably be buying that at the right point in the market. I also want high rental yield and high rental demand. I want to be able to see the data, and I'm ideally looking for Goldilocks properties. And conscious I may run over time, but I'll hopefully get a chance to show you some of the Goldilocks properties that I've managed to acquire and explain how I do it. Typically, you get data like this. This is, these are the city stats. These are the average rents in a city. But, as we all know, if we've had exposure to the property market, different areas of cities and regions perform differently. Is it the same? Does it apply to all property types? And is the data current as well? And data currency is really important. Now, if I try to look at sold prices in 2020 and compared them to 2019, that will be ludicrous because we were in a totally different situation in 2020. So what happened in 2019 would have been completely irrelevant to me. What I've also observed is that not all areas perform exceptionally well. Most areas will perform close to an average in an area or a city, but there'll be areas that underperform on the left-hand side. So there are areas that don't grow as much, and there'll be areas that overperform. And we saw that in those postcodes that I showed you earlier. There was one postcode area that was actually in decline, and there were some postcode areas that were growing at 14%. So, this is common all of the time across the whole of the industry, whole of the country. What I have observed and what I have measured in data, and this is critical. So if you've got your pens and your papers, make a note of this. It's really important. I teach it all of the time. We always see a spike or a growth in rent demand before we see sales grow. So the reason for that is in the UK, if you want to rent a property, generally the time from deciding to move in to take that property to moving into it is about 5 weeks. It takes about a month basically for you to go, right, I want to move to this area and I want to rent that property. If you wanted to buy a property right now in the UK, it'll take anything between 3 and 6 months. So if there's a sudden demand for people to live in an area, people suddenly want to move or live in an area, and they suddenly want to live in a particular property type in that area, I can always see that in rental demand before I see it in sales demand. So for those of you that look like measuring markets and looking at information about local markets, stop looking at sales, start looking at the rent demand, because that tells me if a new factory has opened up or a new school has opened up or a new hospital has opened up, and it's suddenly caused an influx of people and an increase in income or affluence in an area so people can pay more, I will see it in the rental market before I see it in the sales market. It's very critical, that. And again, as I mentioned a moment ago, this is another set of data that I pulled. This is more recent, actually. This is just in the final quarter of last year. This is Cardiff postcodes. Look at the amount of demand there is in some areas. 85% of stock is turnover. Bearing in mind that most agents pre-COVID would turn over about 10 to 15% of their stock a month. In CF35, across all agents, more than 80% of their stock was selling each month. They're running out of stock. And you'll also notice the orange bar, which is price change. You'll see that most areas, or many areas, if you pardon me, outperform CF35. And look at CF33, it's got one of the lowest growths and one of the highest demands. So there's no prizes for guessing which area is likely to perform better moving forward, which one is going to have the higher house price change over the coming 3, 6, 9 months. It's the one that's got the most demand and has had the least growth. So it's simple stuff, it's easy to do, but you have to be disciplined and you have to do it. Okay, now all of that's very difficult. I worked very hard and I haven't quite got this ready yet, but I have got a product that helps you to see that type of information in a dashboard for yourself. So I am about to launch this product for testing. If you would like to test the product, there is a QR code on the screen now and a URL there where you can register to trial a piece of software, a platform where I can give you an automated version of that analysis so that you can see it in real time. Now, the other question is what drives rent demand? So I've talked about, something might happen in an area, a new train station, a new hospital, some big business moves to an area, or people are just attracted because of a school. And we've also talked about the fact that different areas grow at different rates, and the fact that I can see rental growth or decline before I see house price growth or decline. So one will follow the other. House prices will follow where rents have been. And I'm conscious I've got a few minutes left, so I'm going to hopefully rattle through this and tell you how I've made some money with data. So it's my leverage and strategy. So this is a property that I bought a couple of years. Just disclaimer, these are all pre-COVID or just in the first stage of COVID. Okay, I bought this property. I analyzed the market and I found that this property was in an area where there's a shortage of 3-bedroom properties. So lots of 2-bedroom small properties, not so many 3-bedroom larger properties. There was also a huge spike in rental demand in this area, but the house prices haven't moved yet. So I was able to get a really good purchase on this property. I got it for £45,000. It didn't sell at auction, so I put a really firm offer in on it, and I managed to get that accepted. I spent £16,000 renovating it, and it was then worth, and some extra expenses. It stood me £69,000. That's what I put into the deal. At the exit 6 months later, I had it revalued at £120,000. It was a 3-bedroom property. I put a partition wall up and decorated it, made it look nice. So I made a significant increase in the value of the property. Even after I'd remortgaged it, I still pulled £21,000 out of that property. So significant uplift in value. I'm also quite averse to too much work. I like the idea of passive income, which is where we started this conversation this evening. So I like to buy properties and not have to do anything. So I bought this property in an emerging market, exactly as I've described to you this evening, where there was an increase in rental demand and property values weren't moving. No one else was buying in this location, very few. I bought this thing for £57,000. I spent £120 renovating it. I needed to fix some tiles. That's all I had to spend. I had a tenant ready to move in. I got it revalued a few months later at £82,500. So I made a significant jump in value. It happened very quickly, the sudden rush to buy properties in this area, but I was in first. So not only did I buy this property, I got all my money out on a mortgage, plus I had a little bit left over as well. So £25,000 of equity growth on that property. I also bought HMOs as well. Example of some HMOs that I bought. I just repurposed them, and as again you can see, the equity growth on that one property alone was £87,000. Now, I'm not one to try and reinvent the wheel, so I actually bought the one next door as well. So you can multiply the equity growth by 2. So I remortgaged those and still had £44,000 left over after I'd bought them. So, cash-wise, for those of us that are focused on cash and generating cash to continue to invest and momentum invest, there was £90,000 out of those 2 properties that I was able to reinvest. I like big properties. These are single-let properties. This was an area that I identified. There's loads and loads of 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom, small, high volume sort of property, and not an awful lot of larger properties. Yet it was near a hospital, and our hospital was expanding, so there was a need for larger properties for families to live in. So I went right in and bought some 4-bedroom properties. And I also noted in data that there was a huge gap between a not so well presentable property and a property that suits the market. So, modern kitchen, modern bathroom, decorated nicely inside, all fresh and ready to go. So I bought that for £75,000, and I got it revalued at £170,000 after spending £25,000 on it. So I made £65,000 of equity growth. I also buy small properties as well. Is this example of some cottages that I bought? Similar story again. This was an up-and-coming area. I found it before anyone else. I invested in this area. I even phoned the estate agents up and said, look, this is getting a bit silly. I can't believe how cheap these properties are. If you get any more, let me know. And because I'd said that, they then went set about increasing the asking prices on their properties. So that meant that by virtue of the fact that I'd told them they need to start increasing the value or the price of properties, I benefited from that because the whole market increased in value as a result. So I copy and paste. I just did exactly the same thing again down the road as well. And just in 18 months of investing just in that side of my business, excluding the commercial stuff and all the other things that I do, I got all of my money back on it. Every penny that I put into those properties, I got back plus £166,000. And it's not a lot of property, is it? So, this is really doable. And this is all through data. So again, you've got lots of data sources. You can use Gumtree, you can use the Freedom of Information Request, you can use Facebook, use ONS, and you can use us as well. As I've mentioned, we've got services to support you. My contact details are there. You can contact me. Please don't all rush to ring me at once. Do try and drop me an email or contact me on Facebook. I prefer that. And I've also got a YouTube channel as well, where you can see some of the latest videos and latest stuff that we've been up to, and some great chats with people as well. And it's really important to remind you that insights and data lead strategy. So it's critical. It's critical now more than ever. And because of that, I want to just give a few things away this evening. So if anybody wants a copy of my market read, I will disclaimer alert, the next version of my market read is not being published until the end of next week. So if you download it now, you'll be getting, it'll still be relevant, but bear in mind that there's a new one with exactly the same link coming out at the end of next week on Friday. You can also get a copy of my book if you want to. You can go to Amazon and buy it. It's $17.99 on Amazon, but I think there's a deal running at the moment. And also you can get, if it's to be delivered to the UK, if you've got a UK address where we can deliver it to, you can get a copy of my book for free. Okay, so if you want to have a free copy of my book, get your phones ready because there'll be a QR code in a moment. And I also do regular meetings. You can join me on a weekly call if you'd like to. There's also one-day data workshops that I run every month where you can learn how to improve your data knowledge and apply it in your business. And I also do an intensive insight boot camp for property investors that really want to go to the next level. If any of those things are of interest to you, I hope you've got your camera to hand, because I've got some QR codes for you. Those QR codes will give you those things for free. There's no commitment or anything like that. The only thing is you have to pay the postage and packaging on the book, but you can download the market read for free. You can find out more about my data workshops for free as well. No obligation to do anything. I don't really like hard sales. I'd rather people make an informed decision. So do feel free to capture those codes and get the information that you may need. It's simple enough. Hold your camera up at the screen and it should open up a web browser for you. I will put those links in the chat box in a short moment as well. As I said, I got the ultimate property acquisition workshop, the one-day thing that I do. That we've actually got one running on Saturday this week. It's on Zoom. So if you'd like to join that meeting, that workshop, feel free to do so. But I would encourage you to just look at some of the stuff that I've done first before you take the step to spend money on any training or workshops with me, please. And there's dates in January and April for those. And a little bit earlier on in the presentation, I mentioned that I've got some of this stuff automated for you. So if you don't want to go and do all the analysis yourself, and why would you, I suppose? And at the moment, you just want to just get a feel for how you're performing, the areas that you've been looking at. If you want to just see and look at some other areas, grab that QR code and register for the launch of Ultimate Property Dashboard, because that'll give you the insights in real time, and it'll be updated every week for you. And it pulls a load of other interesting stuff in as well. I haven't got time to go right through it right now, but I would encourage you to register, because being the first to access that will put you ahead of the competition. I have run over, so I do apologize for running over a little bit. I'm going to cut off all of this sort of stuff. Again, just a reminder, ultimatelandlord.com resources for anything that I do or anything that my business does. But I think you've got that QR code a little bit earlier on. Reminder that insight and data lead strategy. My business is Ultimate Landlord Research. It's been a real pleasure presenting to you this evening. I started off a bit negative, talking about how bad things are and like when I was a child and how things didn't work out so well for us. Look, it actually worked out really well for me in the end. So I managed to buy the home this is the day that I got the keys to my home. The nets have gone in the curtains. It's a little bit more presentable now, but I bought my dream home in 2013. Something that I'd always wanted. My children have grown up and enjoyed this property, as is my family. So I'm very proud of that. That was delivered by property investing, not by my employed income. It was only through my property investments that I was able to get this property. And not only that, but my mum. Again, I was able to help and support my mum. My mum lives nearby. We managed to get her a nice property in a nice part of town as well. But that was because we used the data. It's not because of what anyone told us. We worked together as a family to deliver what we want for ourselves, but also what other people want as well. And it's a real honor and a pleasure to be able to help not just myself, but also my mum and my wider family, and also the people that work with me as well. So I wanted to end on a bit of the positive ways in which property investing with data can affect your lives and the lives of other people. And with that, I will hand back to Jito, and thank you again for listening to me this evening.
Thank you, John. Thank you. What a valuable session that was, John. In fact, it was like we will be reaching out more often to you, John. Now, what you have just shared is like a gold mine, and we have to keep mining again and again. And whenever we finish, we can keep coming back and keep mining. So thank you for what you have just opened up for us. This is just, I can say, a preview of what you have done and what you have achieved in decades of your career, previously in retail and then in property. And I'm sure all your kind of students, I could say, or people who have been mentored by you, they keep kind of coming back to you to gain this knowledge and experience and continue to grow in their property journey. So at Project Possible, we are really glad to have you as the first expert for this new year, and you have added real value to all our audiences. I can see on the Instagram, we've been getting waves from so many people. So I share that waves to you.
Thank you.
And on YouTube also, we got people live watching. So I'm just sharing their messages also. Now, we do have some questions in chat, some questions which has been collected in advance. So what we'll do is we'll open up the floor for anyone to ask the questions. And what I'll do is I'll raise the first question from the chat. Is that okay, John? I can start with the Q&A. Yeah.
Fire away. I'm delighted to take questions. Thank you.
Yeah. So the first question is from Jilu. His question is this a buyer or a seller market in West London? What do you think the market will be in 5 years' time for this area?
Okay. Ooh, no, I need my crystal ball for that. So can I just check the question? So the question is, what will the market be like was it West London?
Yes, West London. Is it a buyer's or seller's market in West London, and what it will look like in 5 years' time? Okay, so at the moment in London, it's very volatile. I would suggest that it's static. It's kind of in balance. So there's unlike most other parts of the UK, there's a balance. I think that to answer that question, there are probably two things that I would point you to. One, inflation. Now, London and the sort of greater London market has been hampered by significant demand and a lack of available stock or development for many years. Plus, also the attraction of it being the capital city and it also attracting investment from overseas. What we've found with that, or I've observed with that, is that the affordability of property in London has reached a point at which it can't really grow anymore, because people just simply can't afford it. And what is happening to us now, and we're all seeing it, is that inflation is really starting to take a grip. In fact, it's been doing it for a year, but we just haven't seen it yet, because you have the impact, you have the ingredients, and then you have the cake at the end, if you want to call it a cake. Inflation is really going to bite hard. Now, that's going to push up wages, and I don't know whether or not that's going to be across the board, all of the UK, but I would argue it probably will push up wages quite considerably in London. So as wages go up in London, we flip back into properties becoming more relatively affordable compared to average household incomes, and that means that there's a step further that property prices can go. Now, as it stands today, I don't really know where inflation will end. What I do know, and I can tell you reasonably confidently, is that inflation is high and it will continue to grow over certainly the next few months. It's going to keep going up. So to answer the question in terms of, will it stay stable and static? I'm not sure. I think it may become a seller's market. And in terms of the outlook long term for 5 years, I would just point us all to some of the geopolitics that's going on at the moment, as well as the existing problems we've got. So in the system, we've already got the fallout from COVID, Brexit, and all of those sorts of things, plus the rampant inflation in raw materials and logistics, which is now starting to filter through to our everyday lives. Plus, we've also got major problems with Ukraine at the moment, and and even as we sit here tonight, there's still discussion over where it goes. If there is conflict and turmoil, that could radically impact the market, and in a way in which I would argue would put more pressure on asset values and more pressure on our government, and certainly the fiscal measures that we've got within the UK, and actually in most of the European and US markets. There'll be pressure to support our economies and possibly make credit even easier. But I don't know I don't fully know that yet. I can't give you a definitive. I just know that it'll have an impact. So with that in mind, 5 years, it's hard to call it over 5 years, but all of the indicators at the moment suggest that certainly within the next year or two, there will be inflation in properties. And if you wait, you may not
realize that. And if you go in after the inflation and the growth has happened, you may actually lose out later on. So I think in a 5-year view, you're going to see growth. I would suggest that what's critical is where you enter the market. Do you enter it now, or do you enter it in 3 years time within that 5-year cycle? I would argue probably should be thinking about the market now. I'm not qualified to give you financial advice, so I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just telling you what I think the market is going to do, and where I think that there will be an opportunity to ride on the wave of increased demand. Very long-winded answer there. Apologies. Next one will be shorter, I promise.
Thank you, thank you, John. What I'll do is I'll hand over to Robin and Suja. They will continue with the questions because I was conscious they were the one who was supposed to host the Q&A. So Robin, if you can unmute and continue with the questions to John, please.
Thank you, Jito. Thank you, John, for the wonderful explanation of your career along with your data and analytics that you have shown on the screen to our lovely audience. And to continue with the Q&A, we have another question from 𝐏𝐬𝐧 𝐏𝐞𝐧, where he asked about what is the best part of the country to invest if you are not cash heavy. Granted, it's best done at the postcode level, but this question is generally at the town level.
Okay. Best place in the UK, there are several. There are 300 or more, just over 300 postcode regions. So the first part of the postcode area in the UK. There are significant opportunities in what were traditionally low growth, lower house price areas. I don't want to offend anyone who lives in any areas. Frankly, I live in a low house price area. I live in South Wales, where comparatively property is reasonably cheap. So I would be certainly looking at the northwest of England. I would certainly be looking at parts of the Midlands outside of Birmingham, and I would be looking in sort of along the M4 corridor as we go further west. So those sorts of things. What I don't want to do is give everybody a list of postcodes, and I certainly don't want to give a definitive, because frankly, you should do the analysis yourself, because if I can tell you postcodes, but I can tell you now, let's pick a place, for example, if you bought a property in, if you're buying property in Liverpool, if you're buying it near Liverpool Airport, a couple of years ago, I would have been encouraging you to buy 3-bedroom family homes because they were the growth area of the market. When I did the analysis in December, again, I would not be buying those properties. I would be buying 1- and 2-bedroom properties because that's where the market's moved. And that'll change again because these things always go in cycles. When I showed you the rent and sales demand, that it's cyclical. So different property types and different areas have their growth at different points in time. So you've got to constantly move between them. Now, the art for you as an investor is to be able to analyze and understand that in real time. That's why I've created that software, because I want you to be able to say, right, I am now going to invest in, I pick a random area at Nuneaton, and I'm going to buy a particular property type in Nuneaton because that area is about to see a spike in demand. Is seeing a spike in demand. It's going to see a spike in property values. So yeah, that would be my advice here. Coming on my one-day workshop, and I don't mean this as a plug, but I'll teach you how to do that if that's something that really is of interest. And you know, I've got, as Jita said, I've had absolutely loads of people who've started doing this simple analysis that takes a few hours to learn, that are just playing in markets no one else is playing in. It's really frustrating when you enter a property market and there's loads of other property investors trying to do exactly the same thing as you. It is far easier to go to a location where no one else is investing, but there is demand. So yeah, I'm sorry I can't fully answer your question and give you a list of postcodes, but yeah, to kind of answer that question, do your analysis in those areas that have traditionally been sort of lower cost to buy property. There's if I can, I'll just add another thing to that. It's really worthwhile looking at the average income in an area, and you can get that from ONS, and it's updated regularly. There are lots of areas where people's income has really started to increase. Areas where traditionally they've not seen great increases. They're not in London and they're not in the southeast. They are those northwest areas. So where there's been a spike in income and not a spike or an increase in property values would suggest to me that's an area where property values are likely to increase at a faster rate. So again, you can do that. If you just want something nice and simple, just look at areas where people's income has seen a big increase over the last 6 months or so.
Thank you, John. To add on to that, a second part to that question is, how is it possible that interest on mortgage is going down again against the salary if the value of the property has gone up in the multiples of salary?
So yeah, to answer that, so as a percentage of your disposable income, so let's say, if you, it's because interest rates are so low is the answer. Okay, so it's never been cheaper to basically get a loan, or which is a mortgage, and service that debt as a proportion of your average household income. So although the media says house prices are too expensive and unaffordable, they're actually not. They're actually really affordable. Now you can, at 2%, you can have £100,000 mortgage and pay £200 a month, which is, you can't rent anything for that sort of number. So it's exceptionally cheap if you just pay it to service the interest. That is, it's incredibly cheap to do so. The barrier has been for nearly 10, probably more than 10 years now, has been the ability to access that credit. So for those of us that are fortunate enough to be able to pay big deposits, we can make money hand over fist, frankly, and that's why we get a bit of a bad reputation, because the playing field isn't really fair. You think about, a first-time buyer. When I was a first-time buyer, I only needed a 2.5% deposit. Most in the last 10 years, it's been closer to 20% for first-time buyers. I know it's got a little easier lately. So that's the sort of the myth or the misunderstanding of property. In terms of what I pay, or what the average person pays to service their mortgage, is lower as a proportion of their income than at any point in the last 42 years. So that's what I mean by that, is that it's actually not expensive to pay a mortgage. It's just really expensive to get, you need to have a lot of money to get access to that mortgage, which is where the bottleneck is. That's changing. I'm pretty certain that we're going to see changes in that field over the next, certainly 12 months, possibly the next 6 months.
Thanks for that. And Savio is asking, where is the best place in UK to buy houses? What do you think about East Midlands? Which town would you think in East Midlands?
Oh, I'm not. I'd love. I want to answer you. See, I want. No, I'm not going to answer it. What I'm going to say is, in the East Midlands, there are many locations where there's high growth potential. So there's not just one or two. There are many. There are several. But it really matters what you buy in those areas. It really matters which properties that you buy. Now, I'm not going to give you the answer to that, because part of I'll be honest, my business model is for me to help you to either understand that and I earn income from that, or it's to provide you with a report and I also generate income from that as well. So I can't give it away, much as I'm sure many people would want me to. And also, if I answer that question, I think everyone else will ask me exactly the same question for the areas they're interested in. What I'd ask you to do is just get a hold of my market read and get a hold of my book, and that'll help you an awful lot. Because really, what I tell you, if I tell you tonight where you should invest, in 2 to 3 months' time, it will be out of date. It won't be the best place to invest. So all of us need to constantly measure the market. So I'd prefer to answer your question by saying I'll show you how to find all of the locations where it's good to invest, as opposed to just give you a location, because I might be wrong, and I could be wrong next month when I do my analysis. So yeah, sorry to not be able to answer your question the way I would like.
The next question is, what will be your advice to a prospective new entrant into the property market, especially if the person is not cash rich?
Not cash rich, right? Not cash rich. Certainly buy in an area where the market is going to work for you. So many people, and I'm gonna have a bit of a rant here, I'm sorry. So many people are trained to buy absolute wrecks of properties and spend lots of money and lots of time renovating them so that they can increase its value by more than they put in at the start in terms of a deposit and also in terms of renovation. And that has worked for a long time in the industry. But it doesn't really work when you've just about got enough money for the deposit and you can only afford certain types of properties. So for you, and frankly, for all of us, actually, whether you've got a small amount of money or a large amount of money, you want to make that money work as effectively as you can. Let the market work for you. Right? I am only interested right now in investing in property types and property locations that are going to grow really quickly over the next 12 months and by a lot. So if I can buy into a location that's going to grow 15% this year and it grows, I don't know, another 8-9% next year, I can in 12 to 18 months, I can then refinance that property and get most of my money back out without doing anything, without spending money on refurbishments. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't. I think we should refurbish properties. I think it is a good strategy, it's a good thing to do, but it shouldn't be the only part of what we do. So if I was starting out again, if I just had a small enough money to buy a deposit and get started, I would be, more than anything else, I would be focusing on the area that's likely to grow the most, because that's how you're going to really make that money work. When I started out investing in the early 2010s, I had a good salary, I had plenty of cash coming in each month, but I didn't have a lot of savings. So I couldn't afford to just go and start investing, 80, 90, 100,000 pounds. Frankly, I didn't even have a third of that to invest. But I made that money work really hard for me. I made sure that I bought the properties that were likely to spike in value, and that enabled me to turn that money and churn it again and again and again. It wasn't because I was the best refurbishment specialist. It wasn't because I'm the most artistic person. It's not because I know planning and I have this huge knowledge of planning and building regulations. It was simply because I just knew that the area was going to be in demand. So that's what I would advise you. Do your homework, find the locations where there's a big demand and a big spike in requirement for property, and invest, and be bold and confident enough to invest based upon the analysis that you do, not based upon what someone else tells you to do. Because it's a dangerous thing. I could lie to you. I could lie to you all. I could say, you could argue, I could say, let's get everybody to invest in areas where I currently own properties. That'll push my values up. So, if you listen to me and I told you, I could be dishonest. I like to think that I'm not, but you don't know me. None of you know me. You only know me on this call. So we've got to be really cautious. Be very cautious of what people advise you to do. Do your homework. Find the area that's got the highest demand that you're comfortable investing in. Make sure the properties there are affordable for you to buy, and buy them. And if you can get some money off in the process of buying, or you can add some value by doing a small renovation and funds allow, that's brilliant. So then you get double the amount of increase. You get double bubble, so to speak. You get the market working for you and the fact that you're adding value through more traditional means.
Before I read out the next question, I would like to check with any of the audience if they want to directly ask any question to John. I have another question before I ask that, if any of the audience wants to ask directly over the call. Okay. Another question from Jilu again. What do you want to see in the property that you want to buy? Is there a checklist you follow?
Really good question. Yeah, there is actually. Start of this conversation, Gito said, we are looking for passive income. I am looking for the property that's going to be most passive for me. The most important measure for me in my businesses is my time. I want the maximum possible return on the time that I invest. So I don't necessarily like to buy properties that need too much work. I like to buy properties that need a proportionate amount of work for the amount of money that I'm spending. So obviously, if I'm going to be buying a tower block, I expect there's going to be a lot of work. If I'm going to renovate an old barn, I expect there's going to be a lot of work, but there needs to be a good return on that. For me, my favorite stuff is just standard homes, standard 2 and 3 bedroom properties. There's always a demand for it. There's always a market for it, but there is a higher demand at certain times. It isn't stable. So you'll see an area and suddenly there's a big jump in demand. Then it goes quiet for a little while. Then it jumps again, the S curve. the one that I showed you with rent and house prices. So I like to buy 2 and 3 bedroom homes because on a personal level, I love to provide homes to young people and to families that wouldn't otherwise be able to buy and have been let down by the rental market. That's what I like to buy. That's what I would encourage people. If they want simple and the best possible return on their time, those are the ones that perform best. For me, in my measures, in terms of how I measure my success and my business's success for property investing, my most successful ones are the simple family homes, and my most difficult ones to make stack, unusually, when you've listened to a lot of what's put out there, are the HMOs, the house shares. They take up a lot of time and a lot of resource, and I don't get as much of a return on my time invested as I do on the 2 and the 3 bedrooms standard homes that I buy. Everybody's strategy is different though, but that's my view.
While Jito, I think you had got a few questions from the other participants who said that they won't be able to join.
Yes, yeah. I'm conscious of time, but I'll throw one away, which is I think quite interesting one. Now there is always this emotion of like you find a house and you get that first kind of love impression that, oh, this is something which I need to buy. This should be part of my portfolio. And a lot of investors fail in that trap. They fall in that trap of this area looks very nice. This part of the postcode looks very nice. What you will advise for someone that they should not burn themselves investing with heavy emotions, which is, I know we can't control our emotions. We are all human, and emotions is one of the human gift. But
Yes.
when it comes to property investing, I know some specific disciplines you will share, that 1 or 2 disciplines where anyone can take that away and put that into their own property journey.
Well, first of all, we're all human, and we all have emotions, and we all get excited about things. And I'm not a psychologist, but I'm aware of, and I've read, and people have told me that are far more qualified than I am, that emotional decisions are far more powerful than logical decisions. We're all excited about making money, so we go and invest in property without really thinking about the risks. That's the reason I wrote my book. We all go to a nice leafy area and we think this is going to work really well. And emotionally, we just decide to invest in that area. We go and listen to someone talk about the amazing success they had 2 years ago, converting HMOs in an area, and we go and try and replicate that 2 years later because it sounds lovely and we're very excited about how much money we're going to make. We even go into properties, we can imagine ourselves living in it, and then we get carried away with the specification and the types of things that we do because that's what we would like. It's all the emotions, and they're very powerful emotions. The logical part of your mind works far more slowly, so it's not as quick as your emotions, and it's not as loud, so it doesn't necessarily have the same gravitas. So you've got to give it an opportunity to manifest itself and actually come to the fore. In terms of checklist for property, well, first of all, do your homework. And when I say do your homework, that doesn't involve you phoning up an estate agent and asking what they think. That is not homework, nor is it asking an investor that's already been active in an area for a long time. Remember the house I did at the start, qualitative and quantitative? Work out do a very quick analysis. Is the property that you're purchasing a good price? Is it relevant? And also, in the area and the property type that you're buying, is there a big gap between the top end and the bottom end? Because more often than not, we'll be buying at the bottom end and trying to fix it up and make it look a bit nicer. If the gap isn't big, you're not going to make a lot of money, and you're not going to recover more of that money. So I always look for a large range between property values in a given area. That's the logical side of me. And then I look at demand. So I want to see how much stock is turning over in the estate agents, and I want to see whether or not the rents are going up in the area or they're pretty static. Now you can do that if you use any of the portals, Zoopla or Rightmove. You can work that out. They'll give you the very most basic sort of information. So first of all, don't allow the emotion to happen, but then ignore it or calm it down a little bit. Then I would look at whether or not the property is relevant in an area and it's reasonably priced. Then I would do what I've talked about tonight, which is looking at the market at a local level. Is it the right thing to buy? Are the rents on that particular property type in that area in growth, or are they just sort gone stale, or are they actually in decline? And I would encourage you to learn how to track demand and turnover of stock, because that's a key measure as well. And then you can overlay, is it affordable and the rest. Again, I don't want to go into too much detail, but they're the key basics that I would focus on. And then you can get very emotionally excited at the end when you make a lot of money, or you get your remortgage, or you get your rental income coming in every month. That's when you can really get excited, and you can allow your emotions to run rife, and you can celebrate.
Thank you, John. Thank you. We got Kubena who raised the hand. So Kubena, you can unmute yourself.
Thanks, Jito. John, just a quick one. I just wanted to find out whether you've done any work on the student market, because just want your view on what are the prospects of the student market when it comes to rental. That's one. And then two, will that be a good starting point for someone that's just entering into the property market?
And okay, so the student market. Let's pick on the market first. So first of all, the HMO market across the UK is becoming saturated in some places. Right, in fact, the student market. Everybody talks about great areas to invest, bad areas to invest. I live near Swansea. Swansea is the biggest city, nearest large city to me, and everybody talks about how important and how great the Swansea property market is for student rentals, because HMOs are reasonably cheap and there's plenty of them around. But then you get other reports that say it's the worst place possible to invest, and even some lenders won't actually provide finance in some parts of Swansea because it's so saturated. So you got all this stuff going on. I just like to put all that to one side. If you're investing in the student market, you need to have a very careful and concise understanding of that market. It starts with contacting the university, finding out the number of students that are enrolled for the next academic year, and also the number of students that are enrolled for the current academic year. If that is growing, fabulous. If it is falling, problem. Okay, nobody does this. It's so easy to do. Freedom of information request, you will get the information. Find out what the student numbers look like in those areas where you're investing with students. If the university has got more intake and it's got a strong growth in student numbers, fantastic. Okay, then we can start looking at what's the available stock. So quick and easy, go on Spare Room or a similar website, look at the amount of stock that is available to rent, and look at the amount of stock that is offered for rent, and do a ratio. So if it's 1-to-1, if there's 100 rooms and there's 100 people looking for rooms, fantastic. If you've got 100 rooms and 10 people looking for rooms, not so fantastic. If you've got 10 rooms and 100 people looking for rooms, amazing. That's an area where you should invest. Strange, and I don't want to deviate away from the question, but interestingly, in the HMO market, there's been a lot of talk recently about co-living and sort of professional HMOs, and certainly I own a few of those. But the data suggests now that actually those co-living spaces are in demand away from student areas. So we try and buy existing HMOs or in HMOE areas where there's demand for rooms, and we then try and create co-living professional properties in those locations. And actually what we need to do is look at the surrounding areas. Certainly we take Swansea again, there are a couple of towns near to Swansea where there's massive demand for HMO properties, and nobody's creating them or investing in them. So that's an opportunity, certainly for me and my businesses, that I will be capitalizing on over the next 12 months. Now, the second part of the question is it a good strategy for someone that is starting out? I can't really answer that because I don't know your strategy. So I like to use OGSM, objective, goal, strategy, and measure. I don't know what your objective is, but certainly if you're just taking a bit of a leap of faith and an assumption, if you want cash flow, then yes, HMOs do generate cash flow quickly from one unit. Caveat that with, generally, if you're going to do an HMO and do it properly, you've got to. They are quite pricey to buy. They're very pricey when it comes to renovation as well. You've really got to put the effort in and the money in, and you're not talking about a small 2-bedroom property. Invariably, HMOs are larger, but as a cash flow strategy, I can tell you that it's good. You'll probably already know that it's a good idea. That you can get a lot more off a unit. But I've seen so many people struggle with HMOs because on paper it looks fantastic, and then when it comes to actually renting the rooms out, and keeping them occupied, they fall over and fall foul. So whilst on an Excel spreadsheet or on a stacking document, it looks fabulous. The bottom line is, do you rent the rooms or not? And I've sold HMOs because the market shifted and the rooms don't rent anymore. And what's been really peculiar about that is I've actually had people queuing up to buy those HMOs off me. And I've asked myself the question, why on earth would you do this? And the answer is because they haven't done their homework. They haven't looked at demand. They haven't looked at the student market. They haven't got the roll number from the university. They haven't done a ratio of people wanting to rent rooms versus people that actually have rooms. So they've just jumped in because it's cheap. So I hope that answers the question. If you want to know more about HMOs, I think I did a little piece on my YouTube channel, Ultimate Landlord, on that with an interview with somebody. I'm afraid I don't have the link to post it now, but I'm sure you'll find it. And if you don't, do contact me. Drop me a line on Facebook or something like that, and ask and remind me, and I'll see if I can dig it out and send it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Thank you. I think we'll take this as a last. We got Savio. I think he needs to ask you a question. I'm just conscious he's got 20 minutes and we have few slides to cover. But I think, Savio, if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, good evening, John.
Hi, Savio.
Thank you for a valuable section. Fantastic, really. And it's a key for somebody entering in the rental business or like a landlord. It's very, you covered a vast area. But just want to check that, I think all the buy-to-let properties are loan to value is around 25%, like normally. Some lenders do for 20%. Yes. In your case, I think one of the property you bought it for 51,000, you renovated 16,000 and some extra cost, and then you remortgage it, and I think it's showing a loan to value of 15%. Is it still possible?
One of them I did, yeah. You can still get 85. So it wasn't one of the cheaper ones, it was one of the more expensive ones. So I managed to get an 85% LTV, which means
still
15%.
Possible with the lender, yeah, 85% loan to value.
Yeah, definitely. And they're more expensive. The reason I did it on these is because they were high cash flow. So I actually I needed these properties were part of a strategy. So I bought these because I knew I could buy them cheap, and then I could get them revalued at much higher price because I just caught a really good deal on them, and I was entering the market just at the right time. But the cash I generated at 85% was then used to buy 2 other properties. So I used the cash from those. So I leveraged them right up to 85%. So I got an 85% loan to value mortgage because I then wanted to buy some other properties, which I was only going to mortgage up to about 60%. So my portfolio was balanced, and I do that quite a lot. To answer your question, the mortgage broker is probably better placed to give you advice than I am on this. However, certainly my own personal experience is it is not difficult to get a 75% mortgage. It's actually not that difficult to get an 80% mortgage. And in some instances, particularly on HMOs and larger properties, getting an 85% mortgage is also possible as well.
It's particularly in any lender like Paragon or something like that.
It changes all the time. I couldn't really tell you which one. I'm trying to think who we had that one with. And I want to say Precise at the time, but I'll probably be wrong. Okay, speak to your mortgage broker if anyone wants to find a mortgage broker. I'm happy to recommend the one that I use, but I'm not going to do that in public forum because it's not fair to all of the other mortgage brokers that are out there.
That's fine, but looking at the data is fair enough because everybody got 25% to buy, and if I can squeeze 15%, I can afford to buy 2 instead of 1. So that's the equation.
I tend to find, and I don't know if this is correct either, but it's just my experience. It tends to
it's expensive for a couple of years. If the market did for last 2 years, then it's better to invest in one than better to go in a high interest rate because the returns are very high. But in a different market when it's steady or the market crash, I know that then you have to like the interest if high, then yeah, I know you're liable for liabilities as well. Yeah.
Well,
Thank you for your session,
I wasn't clear actually. In some of these, all of these remortgages, I haven't waited 2 years. I haven't waited for the. So what I would say is you're probably going to struggle to just buy a property unless you use bridge finance, and we're going to get really complicated at that point. But you're probably going to find there's not many mortgage lenders that'll give you 85% to buy a property. But they will give you it when it comes. They will give you them when it comes to remortgaging them. And my strategy with all of my properties is to put my money in and get my money back out as fast as I can. I hate leaving money in a property because it means I can't buy another property and I can't create another home for somebody that would really benefit from it. So quite often I will go in at 75%. So I'll have a 25% deposit. Now you don't all need to do this. But this is what I do. And then I will remortgage back out later. And sometimes I will remortgage back out at 75% when the property is increased in value. And that's, I think, one of my, this one was a 75% on the way back out. And I didn't pull as much money out. I left a lot more money in. And some I don't. But I always remortgage my properties. Once I bought them, I'm always aiming to get my money back out within the first 9 months. Ideally within the first 6 months. And there are lenders out there that will have a no early repayment penalty and they won't apply the 6-month rule. I'm not qualified and I don't know how that changes in the market every single day. That's where your mortgage broker comes in. But tell them your strategy. Tell them, look, I want to buy this and I want to add some value to it. I want to get it revalued. I want to get my money back out on another mortgage within 6 months. And your mortgage broker should be able to assist you with that. Certainly mine does. Because even if you've got hundreds of properties, you still run out of money. Yeah, you can't just keep putting 25% deposit down every time. So yeah, I'd encourage you to speak to a mortgage broker on that. But I'm quite, to answer the question, I'm pretty certain that there's products out there that are 80% loan to value, and certainly in my experience, I've accessed 85% loan to value as well, and that's constantly changing.
Yeah, thank you, John, and thank you, Jito, for inviting me for the valuable session. Thank you, Jito. Yeah, thank you, John. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye.
Thank you, John. Thank you. So, John, like we got 15 minutes left. There are so many more questions, but I'm just conscious. Yeah, so people have really kind of got into the data side of it now. Yeah. So once again, John, first of all, from your busy schedule, you took time for Project Possible platform. You took your time to come be with us and share your knowledge, experience. And take this all questions. Normally, I know in your sessions you don't take questions because you have so much to give. But really appreciate that you have almost given 45 minutes of a Q&A session. So really appreciate. And on behalf of the entire core team of Project Possible and all our audiences and all those people who are going to kind of watch this podcast and so, we give you a kind of a humble and kind of the biggest thank you we can at this platform. But we want to continue this relationship and continue to work with you and your team. And I'm sure a lot of Project Possible kind of community will benefit from your collaboration going forward. Because with your collaboration, it's like a guiding light for any property investor, especially who are starting off. Because in property, if you burn once, then it is really painful to recover from it and then continue. However experienced it is. I have met property investors who have a portfolio of 100, 200 portfolio, and then they got burned with one. That's it. And it's very important. So relying on data and insight and research is so important in today's world. As you started off with by that sentence, that it's more important than in the last 40 years. And there are so many things can go wrong. So it's very important that we all rely on that insight. And being by profession an insight manager, I can see your passion, what you have shared with us. So we are very humbled to have you on this platform. Thank you, John.
Very grateful. Thank you for that. And thank you everyone for giving me your time this evening and listening to me. I'm very grateful as well. So thank you. And thank you, Jito, as well, for giving me the platform. Very much appreciate it.
So what we are going to do is I'll continue to share who's coming next month. So we got the next month's announcement. This is a young chap who started into, he's by profession, he's an accountant, and then he started into property. In fact, last year he was blessed with a little one, his first little one into his family. He's the founder of Midland Capital Limited. And then he has a portfolio of multiple properties. from 32-bed HMO to 22-bed HMO, single lets. He's doing apartments right now. His company known as Midland Capital. So he's going to be with us. His YouTube and Facebook page is there, and he will share his journey, how he started off from an accountant who used to work 14, 15, 16 hours a day as a young accountant and did not have time for his family, could not start his young family. And then in the last 5-6 years, how he has built a multi-million portfolio, and purely how he was able to raise capital, build relationship with projects. He didn't, from an accountant background, he didn't had no experience of going and doing and building and doing projects. And one of the recent projects he is currently doing with a $500,000 property, he's doing a 2.2 million valuation. So that's the kind of things he's able to add value to the society and to the community. So Sean will be with us next month on on 16th of January. He will be with us on the same platform virtually, and he will be sharing his journey, his challenges, how he overcome, and how he managed to build from an ordinary life as an accountant to a portfolio of multi-million, making over I think from last when I spoke to him, or I got an inside information, is that his monthly rental income has crossed £50,000 every month from his portfolio, which he has built in the last 4 to 5 years. But I'll leave that Sean to explain. So make sure that you book the date for next month so you can be on this platform. We also have Facebook group with 1,300 members on our Facebook group. So please connect on the Facebook group, share this group with so many people. We get our daily updates, our weekly updates, our monthly updates, all those things. You have any questions to ask, please go on the Project Possible Club Facebook and join hands with 1,300 people who are part of this community. We also have a YouTube channel, which came up on the basis of a lot of people asked, Jito, can you share your knowledge, or as your core team members, can you share the knowledge? So we launched it. We got 460 subscribers, 8,000 views. So thank you for all those people who've been watching our videos and encouraging us and giving us that feedback and what next you need. So we got more than 90 videos on our YouTube channel. So please make sure that you can, you go and watch this channel. Let it be you are a first-time buyer or starting a property journey or scaling up your business, or you have a question and you are finding an answer. So you can find a lot of solutions here. And we continue to keep adding Monday to Friday evening 7 p.m. We keep adding more and more content on this YouTube channel. Now, a massive thank you. So first of all, our expert who came, who invested his time and who has given his wisdom, knowledge of experience, what he has accumulated over the years from the property journey. And he has valuably shared that information. All those people who have joined us this evening, you could have been doing something else with your loved ones, with your family, but you sacrificed, you gave up that time and came on this platform and shared with us and learning about property investment. That shows your commitment. And in 2022, it's all about commitment. It's good to know a lot of information, but that knowledge, that information, they say knowledge is kind of only valuable if you act on it, or else it just becomes an information. So please, whatever John has shared with you guys today, act on it, or else it is just an information. You heard it and you left it. That's not the point. If you want to create value out of it, commit yourself that whenever you invest into property, you will rely on data, insight, and research. You will just not go drive your emotion and invest somewhere and then burn for the rest of your life. Don't do that. Okay. So once again, on behalf of Project Possible, for all those people who have joined this virtual platform, a massive thank you. And people who have joined late, a happy new year. And we see you next month again on a session. And until then, stay safe, stay blessed. Thank you.
I got the cash in the bag, stadium packed. Born a rock star in this life, gon' live it up on the attack. Baby, I'm bad, I just wanna get caught up in this life. I'm crazy, I'm mad, doing no cap. Only God wants, so you better go live it up. Cash in the bag, stadium packed. Baby, I'm bad,
yeah.
Baby, I'm bad.
I just wanna stay bad, stay mad. Chip on my shoulder cause they treat me like an outcast. I ain't gonna take that, stay back. I'll be swinging hard till the hits come in all caps. I ain't gonna lay back, pray that someone's gonna help me. Ain't nobody like that. I ain't gonna wait, that's all fact. Give me one shot and I'll never get the throne back. I'm sick of being cautious, I'ma go cause some pain, can't stop this. I'ma steal everybody's lane, call it shoplift. Sick of hearing everyone complain when they thoughtless. Taste the pain, it's like candy canes. It makes me go change into a better frame, into a better name. Society's insane, we all live for fame, yeah. Cash in the bag, stadium packed. Born a rock star and this life, gon' live it up.